going to not be. And don't forget, our mics are hot too, so. We'll try not to share any secrets.
Sorry, we moved you.
Hi, how are you? It's good to see you too. Yeah, I bet. I know.
She doesn't charge per person.
Yeah, so I enjoyed talking to you. You know, those sort of things are really helpful. I'm like, sitting there going, man, I'm thinking my city's been like this too much. And I ended up getting.
You need the money?
No substitute on the AD, and then there were some other ones that kind of affected.
You go to his class on.
Just making them go through another hurdle. They just finally got so much opposition. They
Yeah,
got,
he's giving the opening ceremony.
I'm not happy. Oh,
Oh, good, all right.
yeah, anytime. You know, man, I couldn't let How's your family? I'm glad. Tell them I said hi. Yeah. Hi. How are you?
Oh my gosh. Here, Marcel.
Yes, I did.
Hello.
This is Dave. I think
Good to be here.
it wasn't all great, but
I've been having a busy 2 weeks.
We were 5:30.
yes, we did.
Everyone, it is 5:30 and we are ready to start.
Was that focused on?
Well, it was kind of on all the chit chatters, so.
Thank you very much.
All right, it is 5:30. We'd like to bring our meeting to order. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm glad you're here to visit and socialize as well. So that is a great opportunity that we've not had for many months. So we can celebrate in the opportunity we have to meet together, which I think we all appreciate a lot more than we have in the past, that ability. So to start our meeting off, we would love to have Representative Dan Johnson come up and open our meeting. And as soon as your remarks are done, please lead us in the national anthem.
National anthem.
Oh, sorry, not the national anthem would be wonderful, but
Actually, Fire Chief Hannig is doing that
I
part.
take that back. How about the Pledge of Allegiance? We'll try that again. So, but if you want to serenade us, Dan, that would be wonderful. So, thank you.
Invitation, you wouldn't like it. Thank you for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. Thank you very much. Just a few quick things I thought I might just tell you about. There are many words that have been used to describe the pandemic and what everyone has gone through to navigate their way through it. And a lot of times you hear this word, it's unprecedented. And that's the very same word that was used with the 2021 legislative session. It was unprecedented. Not only in the way that it had to be orchestrated to keep everybody safe and to use different sorts of tools to communicate with one another, but also just in terms of what happened. And then the second word that was used a lot was historic, which I find to be a rather fascinating word. There are a lot of things individually, as you look over sessions, I'm sure, there's sort of historic, watermark sorts of things, but there were lots of them this time. And I thought I'd just share just a couple of them. I don't want to spend a lot of time with statistics, but I think there are three that really stand out. And then something that's more on a personal level, if you don't mind, I'd like to share with you that I think is important for our city. This will affect you. There was $1.1 billion increase in transportation infrastructure. I don't know exactly how that's gonna fall out for Cache County and through the downtown of Logan, or out on 3200 South, or out on a highway. But I think we ought to all make sure that we're looking at that. That's a really important investment. It's an important investment because one of the things we want to do is make sure that people have jobs, that this continues. In infrastructure projects, it employs a lot of people. And a lot of people who are on the periphery of those projects get helped by those projects. And I think that's going to be a really important thing moving forward for us. There's a $100 million cut in taxation. There's actually three parts to that. One, which I think is really important, is $20 million of that will go to our retired veterans. Another $20 million of that $100 million goes to folks who are on Social Security that fall within certain incomes. And then the other $60 million will affect a vast majority of families across the state because we have a young population and there are a lot of kids. And so the deduction for children moved from around $550, which is what happened in the federal, you might recall that in the federal legislation under the Trump administration, moving now to just at the state level, moving that back up to $1,700 to $1,800. And that's gonna make a big difference for young families with children. So that's the 20, 20, and 60 makes up that $100 million. And then there was a $500 million increase in allocations to public education. That is really significant because that's the part where Utah right now, because of the rapid growing industries across the state, has a hard time filling jobs and jobs in particular areas. So we really need to become focused on how we develop that in students as they move out of high school and decide to go on to a tech school or on to a four-year university, whatever that is, whatever path they choose that's best for them. That's going to be really important, and I think as we move forward, that's the change you might remember in Amendment G, which was passed in last fall in the election, and then the being able to come back and then take care of this legislative session with the money to put that back in place. We all need to watch very closely, though, how that goes away, because what we always knew as the earmark of income tax going directly to public education is not in play. But there are other things that are in play that, and I think this sets the stage for it. So I'm looking forward to that. There were four main things, priorities we wanted to accomplish. You can put most of the bills that were passed somewhere in among these four, but some of the more impactful legislation were within these areas. One was to broaden the economic base. The other one was to build a connected future. The other one was to extend opportunity to all. And the other one, at the end of the legislative session you saw, was to balance emergency powers. And I think that was really important, and most of us heard an awful lot about that over the course of the pandemic. So those are some really quick and down and dirty things, but I wanted to tell you, for myself, I sponsored 9 different pieces of bills that were all passed, most of them unanimously on both sides of the in the House and in the Senate. And then I co-sponsored 15 additional bills, and then 3 additional requests for appropriations. 2 of those I'd like to mention to you because they affect us so much right here in town. One was $2.88 million for Family Centers of Utah, and here locally we have the Family Place. The Family Place alone will receive, with my my estimate's on this about 400,000. That's going to be a really nice amount of money for them to provide respite nurseries and also to provide for men and women who are in a situation where they're just needing some temporary help or even some long-term help, maybe some job skill sets and things like that. Then in addition, was able to secure $3,594,000 for prevention and abuse services, victims of abuse, both battered men and women. I don't know if you know this or not, but here at CAPSA and the Family Place, when across the state, and I am telling you the absolute truth, when people look for the model of how to run an organization, they look to those two. Then they model their structure after that. And they've been so powerful in reaching out across the state. We now have 14 victim abuse and victims of domestic violence and victims of sexual abuse all across the state. And there are also 11 family centers like the Family Place and 17 respite nurseries across the state. And that is as a result, Mayor Daines, of the good work of people who live right here in our community. I am going to mention one thing, and Chief Hannick won't want me to, but I'm going to anyway. And that is because he and I spent about the last 2 years trying to figure out how the League of Cities, the League of Towns, mayors, county executives, county commissioners, private providers, hospitals could all ever agree on something. And we were basically told it couldn't be done. But we actually were able to pass a House bill and then on to the Senate, and now it's on for the signature of the governor, Emergency and Medical Services Act, which now provides for local control. You can choose the service you want, the level of service that you want, and who you can choose who the provider is going to be. You have a way to opt out of that if you want. And also, we're out of this situation where one town has taxation and they provide all the funding for EMS services to another spot. And that's happening across the state. And as I understand it, it was happening here a bit. But the way this was resolved was done the right way. And it took 2 years getting everybody on board. But I think you all know, because you do this work all the time, you have to be able to get the important players around the table and try to solve complex problems and listen and try to resolve it. So that's what we did. So if you ever get a chance to thank him for that. The state of Utah, the only one thing people will say about that bill, it should have been done 30 years ago. So.
Before you leave us in the pledge, can I thank you for your help on HB 82?
Yeah.
It was wonderful that you helped facilitate conversations with Representative Ward.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time sneaking over to his desk.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dave. That made a huge
An
difference.
opportunity on some of those things to visit with the mayor and also with Kimber. I want you to know that I think they feel free to give me a call. I'd like any of you to feel that way as well. And I've gotten some really good, well-detailed emails from various ones of you on different topics. And I think that's what I'm really here for. I represent House District 4, which is pretty much the city of Logan in terms of the population piece, but I also represent the rest of the state. So, would y'all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Johnson. It was wonderful to have you come and give us that update. Unfortunately, it wasn't 10 bills out of 10. I was trying to sponsor a bill with him, but maybe next year. So we'll see how that works. So thank you so much. All right, open for a motion for minutes and approval of the agenda.
I'm happy to make a motion to approve the minutes of the agenda.
I'll second the
Second,
motion.
all right. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion from anyone? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Minutes and agenda have been approved. All right. Our regular meeting schedule for 2021 are the first and third Tuesdays at 5:30, and our next meeting coming up is on April 6th, 2021. Questions and comments for the mayor and council. This item has been suspended due to the limit of the number of people in attendance in the council chambers at this time. Please email your comments and questions to teresa.harris@loganutah.org, who will distribute them to the mayor and the council members. I know we've gotten quite a few letters on the watershed project, so we will be hopefully addressing those later today. So, very good. Mayor, you are up.
Thank you very much. There is just one agenda item shown on the printed agenda, but because of the current, there are a lot of questions, a lot of emails, a lot of information and misinformation out there about the Logan Watershed Project. I have invited for item B, Zan Murray from JUB Engineers to present to council some background information and answer questions. So we'll first begin with item A. We welcome Julie Hollis-Terrell, who is the director of the Cache Valley Visitors Bureau. She does a great deal to promote tourism. It's been a crazy year in the past, but it's looking good going forward. So we appreciate her providing an update, and then we'll move directly to Zan.
Thank you. Where's the mystery guy behind the wall who's supposed to do this?
No idea.
Mystery guy behind the wall.
That would be Jeff. Or Kirk, if you're okay.
I just need to show my screen instead of that one. Hi, Kirk.
Oh, there it is. The mystery guy did it.
I just needed you to approach. Okay. All right, well, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to come and talk to you a little bit about tourism. I should probably do this on a more regular basis, but we've had such a crazy year that I wanted to give you a little bit of an insight about some of the things that are going on in the tourism world, and maybe give you a little bit more information than you've had before on what an economic impact tourism has on Cache Valley. And especially since Logan is the largest city, of course, you reap the greatest benefits as far as taxes go and that type of thing. So, first of all, I just kind of want to give you an overview and then detail it down to where we are here in Logan. But in 2019 in the United States, tourists or travelers spent $1.17 trillion. In 2020, we saw here's the unprecedented word, which I'm sick of that word, but it's true, a decline of 42%. So we lost $492 billion in traveler spending. You can see as soon as the borders closed, as far as international travel went, down 76% this year, and the domestic down 34%. Well, something that's interesting, you can see that large impact of business travel spending. So all the people who used to be going to conventions and conferences, and maybe some of you have had this affect yourselves personally, I certainly have, but all of that traveling for business has drastically diminished, 70%. And we are anticipating, some of the newest research is showing that we should not anticipate seeing those face-to-face conferences returning again until at least late third quarter of this year into fourth quarter. But by the time you get to fourth quarter, it's pretty much the holidays and no one cares anyway. So they're kind of telling us don't expect to see a rebound until 2022. Okay, in Utah, in 2019, travelers spent $10 billion. That resulted in $1.3 billion in tax revenues. So that saved every household about $1,200 in taxes that we didn't have to pay because tourists made it up for us. And now I'm going to just bring this down to Cache County level. And the only reason that I have that red U up there in the corner is because there's the Kem Gardner Policy Institute at the University of Utah in the Echo School of Business, and they do tourism analysis for the state. So in 2019, visitor spending in Cache County, $187.2 million. So I just want to pause for one more second and say, did you hear me just say $187.2 million? Are you kidding me? So the three top spending categories you can see I've listed there. Automobiles and transportation, food service, and lodging. And in the research from the United States Restaurant Association shows that they say that anywhere you are in the nation, 26% of the people dining out are travelers. So it doesn't matter where you are. But just so you know, it's kind of about a quarter of the people. In 2019, visitor spending supported 1,720 direct tourism jobs and also 487 indirect jobs. So we have a total of 2,200 jobs here in Cache Valley that are funded by food service, accommodations, gas stations. Those are the three top sectors. Okay, so this is our request for information we received, and I'm not going to go into details about this, but what I am just going to say is that if you notice up in 2019 and 2020, we were only down about 2,500 requests for information, showing that people are just still interested in traveling. They didn't lose that desire during the pandemic. What we really see here that is more along the lines of devastation is we have a visitor's log in the Visitors Bureau, and this is just an indicator because, obviously we don't have every single person sign the register, but you can see in 2019 to 2020, we were down 51% with the number of people who signed the register, another 50% as far as how many people were in the party. But look at this, how many nights people were spending in our area, down 72%. And nights in Utah overall down 70%. So that isn't even as bad as some other places had it, but you can, down by 70% is nothing to take lightly. This is our motel occupancy, and what that represents is the number of hotel rooms we have and how many are available, and then you can see we have 1,047 rooms available right now during the year 2020. And this is the percentage of how many of those rooms are rented by month. This is an actual in-time snapshot. So the red one represents the highest percentage we've ever had in the history of keeping these records, which as far as I can see, go back to what we have about 2002. So we were doing really pretty well in January. In February, we were our highest ever. Then March, we started to see that impact. Look at April, oh my word. 24.7% occupancy. That same month in Salt Lake City, because of, in their convention district in the downtown, they normally have 71% occupancy. And this year, in the month of April, they had 17% occupancy. And that is devastating. So you can see those numbers. Overall, our occupancy was down. We were 53% compared to 62% last year. And that doesn't maybe sound like that's such a bad deal, but the problem is that the amount of money that the hoteliers were able to charge per room also dropped substantially. So the amount of money that we brought in per room was compounded by the the decrease in motel occupancy. Now this is the transient room tax. That is a 4.25% tax that is placed on every hotel room. In the city of Logan, you have also enacted a 1% transient room tax, which is your option to do so on every hotel that is in the city of Logan boundaries, and you get that 1%. That is not reflected here. The adjusted rates don't bother to look at because a couple of years ago the county switched from 3% to 4.25. So I just wanted to be able to see those apples to apples. So if you'll just look at that far right column, the highest collection for the month and year in history. Look at 2020. This is reflecting 2 months previous. So we're actually looking at collections for months November of 2019, December. It's a 2-month delay because of the way that the taxes are filed. So people are filing monthly or they're filing quarterly, but there is a 2-month delay. So when you're looking at that March number of 60,000, that's actually reflecting January stays. So we're off to a roaring start at the end of 2019 and into 2020, and then you can see how it plummets. Look at the collection in June, $18,000. The year before, $57,000. So this decline was immense. You can see in the November collection was our highest ever, reflecting September. We had some interesting anomalies with some, we had some baseball tournaments that decided to come in who haven't been here before, and a dog show, which apparently fills a really lot of rooms, so we'll take it. Yeah, they do. They're gonna be back here again in May, and they fill like 5 days of for all different kinds of dogs having a show, and it fills hotels. It's crazy. So anyway, I just wanted you to be able to see we are about an 18% decrease in our transient room tax collection, which also indicates what the hoteliers got was an 18% decrease this year.
Question.
Please.
Does that mean that most of our hotels allow pets?
Most of them do allow pets.
Wow.
Sometimes you have to pay an extra fee, but they have to know about it. So, okay, I thought this was really interesting. This is the first time I've ever had this information available. And it might not mean as much to you as it does to our hoteliers, but what we really saw this year was a drastic increase in people who were coming to Airbnbs and VRBOs. Families and couples were like, I'm gonna get away, but I'm gonna be by myself, and I don't have to interact with other people at a hotel or in a hotel setting. So you see the $62,000 collection of tax compared to our hotels at 611. We're seeing now, so what's happening is the hotels are being encroached upon by this business. So 10% of really what they made on top of that was taken away by Airbnb and VRBO. And I think that's gonna be an increasing trend because people have tried it now and they're gonna keep doing it. Also, so online booking agencies, so we're talking Hotwire and Kayak and places like that, showed $46,000. And look at, our camping this year, $25,000 compared to $20,000 the year before. This isn't reflected in the TRT collections, but we had about our camping increased by almost double this year. So people are out in the forest, and the forest ranger told me that every weekend up there was like a holiday weekend used to be. And there's some real concern too about now people are stampeding through the forest, but a lot of them are city slickers who've never done it before, and they don't know how to do things like, pick up your stuff and don't go to the bathroom on the trail and some things. So I'm gonna be maybe working on some campaigns with radio and stuff to try to help advertise.
Can you tell me what TRT means?
Transient room tax.
So it's just the tax, so in all reality, there's probably Airbnbs and VRBOs that are not paying any of that.
That's correct. However, if they are registered with the name Airbnb or VRBO, they are required to pay that tax. So if anyone else is advertising on the sly or whatever and not affiliated with one of those kind of organizations, it's highly possible that they're just doing it under the radar.
Okay, thank you.
And in order to pay for transient room tax, it stays that are 30 days or less. So, for example, summer citizens, when they come, they don't pay transient room tax because they're here for 3 months.
Right.
Okay. This is something I just wanted to point out to you that I thought was really interesting, and that is the restaurant tax last year, in 2020, was up 1.9%. Now, 1.9% is not a huge deal when you're looking at percentages, but the year before it was up 7.3%. So we went above and beyond that, and some of that is because, I think people were trying to support the local industries and help them, and also because after a while we just got sick of, it was like the one thing we could do is get takeout, So those numbers were up for the year. However, in the last couple of months, we have seen a decrease of about 6%. So I'm not sure what to attribute that to. I'm hoping that will rebound as well. But interestingly, that's the one thing that was up. I thought you might think this is interesting. I have a report that's called Visa View, and what that does is it tracks all of the expenditures of Visa cards that happen in Cache County. All the residents, the zip codes are excluded, so we know it's no locals who are showing this spending. But in 2019, Visa card owners spent in the third quarter $38 million. This is people who are not Cache Valley residents. In 2020, it was $41,000. Now, we know that there was an increase in tourism from locals, regional people, and domestic travelers. And so I think that's partly why we're seeing that increase. And in the fourth quarter, we were also up a couple of $1,000s. However, when you look at the international tourism, look how devastating that was. Total spend amount in 2019 in quarter three, 572,000 dropped to 201, and then 446 dropped to 231. So we can just certainly see those indicators of what happened to the tourism industry. The tourism industry was the hardest hit in the entire United States of all of the industries that are tracked. So it's been rough. I've done some, in the most recent research I've seen, however, the U.S. travel, there's a national organization that's called the U.S. Travel, and in the surveys they've done, 9 out of 10 people surveyed reported that they already have a vacation planned for this year. So whether that means they're going an hour to Salt Lake or if they're going, across the country, 9 out of 10 are planning for that. And I thought it was really interesting because they said we need to prepare ourselves for a wave of revenge spending. And I thought that was so great because people are sick of staying home, they're sick of not being able to go out to eat or to go to shows or go to sporting events or whatever. And so when it breaks, it's really gonna break. So that bodes well, because I think everyone just wants to get out of here, So my job is to make sure that we're positioned appropriately to give the message when it's appropriate, that where they need to be coming is here in Logan. And we've still been working along with the Utah Office of Tourism to maximize our impact in the international markets. We are one of the few states in the surrounding areas that didn't have their budget completely cut by the state. Some of the offices were completely closed. State of Washington, state of Colorado, but those are big competitors for us. So we're kind of more in the top of mind of the international travelers. And so we're already seeing increased in interest from our international markets. And I was on a Zoom call with our German representatives, and it was interesting because, we say we're chomping at the bit, and they to go and to travel, and they said, the people here are, as you say, pawing the hooves. So they're ready to go. They're pawing the hooves. Okay, so I think, I don't know why this doesn't want to play with me. I don't want to take too much of your time because I've already had my 7 minutes, I think. So we do sponsor events from the Visitors Bureau for things that, just that we feel like are important for us to be affiliated with. And the reason that I have this up here right now is the ones in blue, we had committed to sponsor all of these events, but the ones in blue are the ones that were actually held. So you can see how many were canceled. We have some grants that we fund, and we just had a handful of those as well compared to a larger number. And when the pandemic hit, we don't have a restaurant association here in Logan or in Cache Valley, and so I immediately changed my entire tactic to save the restaurants. So I got my staff on the phone. We called every single restaurant in Logan and Cache Valley, which is over 120, so we could get communication information for each of them, and we put together our own website to help out with some of the efforts that were going on that could show what restaurants were doing takeout, where you could dine in until you couldn't anymore, just the status of all of them. We did radio campaigns, and we also did some of these ads, and got together with the Chamber of Commerce and also Logan Downtown.
Hungry?
Can you hear that?
Drive through or call it in, pick it up, take it home. This is Julie from the Cache Valley Visitors Bureau, and our restaurants need your help. Head to a drive-through or call ahead to a local eatery for takeout, curbside service, or even free delivery. Hundreds of Cache Valley jobs are depending on your support. Share the love, especially on weekdays. Pretend you're on vacation and try somewhere new. Nobody wants to cook the wheat from their food storage anyway. For a list of restaurants, visit explorelogan.com.
It's in your own backyard.
So as long as you're not cooking from your wheat from your food storage, I think you're okay. I have a bunch of samples of some of the advertising I did, and I won't make you wade through that with me. But I did want to show you when we kind of changed our tactics a little bit in a couple months after the pandemic began. The whole idea of come in, we're open. You can still come here. We have the trails and everything in Logan Canyon, inviting people to take advantage of some of our outdoor resources. And so I'm just what I want to do is, so we did foodie trek, we're doing road trips. I have these samples here, but I just wanted you to also see a hint of some of the samples of our marketing expenses, because it may not compute exactly how much it costs to promote Logan. I can't really, even though I work for the county, I can't promote Cache Valley or Cache County, because if you haven't noticed, you cannot find the words Cache Valley on a map, period. So if I promote Cache Valley, anybody across the country or the world who's looking is not going to find us. So by default, and also because I'm proud of it too, we promote everything by saying the name of Logan. So we're doing a lot of work for you and happy to do it. But for example, you can see here just some magazine publications, 49,000. That includes everything from LDS Living to Women's Day and Utah Farm and Fork. Billboards alone, we have 3 of them on the I-15 corridor, $43,000 a year. And some, newspaper publications, but radio, $30,000 on KSL alone in Salt Lake City. And our web stuff, online digital media, $76,000. And there are some other additional expenses that I've listed there. And this is not our complete budget, but just for advertising and marketing alone, you can see last year these sample expenses total $327,900. That funding does come from the transient room tax collection. So anyway, I just want to let you know that we're working really hard to encourage people to come back here as soon as they're feeling comfortable and ready, and doing everything we can to help preserve the resources that we have here by supporting them, like for example the restaurants and such, so that all the way along the people will have things to come back to when they're ready to return to traveling. And so I will be joining the people who are pawing the hooves, ready to go. And so that's just a kind of an overview summary. I'd be happy to talk to you anytime about any questions you might have or suggestions you have about markets or things that we could do better. Any suggestions you have, I'm happy to entertain and help if I possibly can. Does anyone have any questions for me?
So can we expect tour buses back in the
Yes,
near
ma'am.
future?
We're working on it. As far as the tour bus industry goes, we are not expecting those really until next year. But it's interesting to see the adaptations that are being made. I was just in what would have been a face-to-face meetings in a conference 2 weeks ago that were done by Zoom. And I met with an operator from Salt Lake City who actually is Chinese and does group tours with the Chinese market. And she now, instead of doing group tours, is focusing on sprinter vans, those big vans that can accommodate 6 to 10 people. And I pitched to her the idea of Logan and the Yellowstone Loop, because the Chinese are very enamored with Yellowstone. So I've been trying to convince them and work with that market for quite some time. And she was so excited, this was on 2 weeks ago on Friday, that she said, can I come up and see you on Wednesday? So we went to the American West Heritage Center, we went to Bluebird Candy, we went to Cox Honeyland, and talked about places to stay, and she's so excited about it that she wants to see if she can get tours already this year, which usually they tell you it's a 3-year process before you can expect any business. But if it doesn't happen, she's going to start this year, but she anticipates by next year that we'll have a group of them every single day, and even into the winter months. So that's just the beginning, but we're still working with group tours. The Canadian market is seeming very interested, in others as well. So it's going to be a little bit more time, but they'll be on their way. Town Place Suites, just so you know, just had their soft opening a couple of weeks ago, so they'll be adding over another 100 rooms to our room availability. The Econo Lodge is being removed from the hotels because they're going to change the purpose of that property. But so we've got new places for people to stay and a lot of interest. So thank you again.
I've seen at least 2 tour buses already.
Yay, I'm so happy to hear it.
They were parked, they stayed at the hotel right over here.
Great. Oh, at the
There all
Hampton?
night, yeah.
And we do have some, like the sports teams that are coming too. Might
Maybe
be
that's
some of
what it
those.
was. Maybe it was a big bright yellow bus.
I'm happy to have it. All right, thank you everyone so much.
Thank you so much, Julie.
Sure.
All right. JUB, time's yours.
That's a tough act to follow,
Yes.
Dan.
It's a whole different topic.
But it's a little different. Tourism, right? In some ways, like the natural beauty of our community.
The Blue Trail.
It's pretty fascinating to listen to the tourism numbers and how they've been affected with the pandemic. But thank you for that information. It was very insightful, even for an engineer. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Zan Murray with JUB Engineers. I'm the project manager for the Logan River Watershed Project. And I brought with me Nathan Dowgs, who's the Cache Water District Director. And I wanted him to just give you a little bit of background about the project, just for a couple of minutes. Since Cache Water District is the sponsor of this project, and in conjunction with Logan, North Logan, Hyde Park, and the Crockett Irrigation Company. So Nathan, you want to give a couple of minutes of discussion about where we're at, or at least what we're trying to accomplish?
Okay, thanks, Dan. So I'm going to start with stealing a couple of Representative Johnson's words. historic and unprecedented. We are on the verge of a historic and unprecedented drought in Utah. If we don't see some pretty significant moisture in the next couple of months, the entire state will probably be in one of the worst droughts we've seen in decades. Cache Valley is faring a little bit better, but we're still well under where we need to be at this time. And as we move forward with climate change and growth, we've got to look at how do we manage our water differently. And if we go back a couple decades, that's where this project originated. If you go back to the early 2000s, Logan City did a stormwater study, a stormwater master plan on how they're going to accommodate stormwater to get it out of the city as the population grows. The canal companies have dealt with how do they keep up with aging infrastructure as development happens around their canals. It gets really hard to take equipment down those canals and maintain those, some of which are well over 100 years old. And so between those two things, over the last number of years, the canal companies, the three cities have been talking about how do we address those concerns. And about 3 years ago, working with JUB, we found a funding source through the Natural Resources Conservation Service, PL 566, that gave us an opportunity to look at those issues. Flooding issues as the primary concern, water conservation as a secondary concern, and then some recreational aspects as well. And to qualify to apply for that funding, you had to have an entity apply for it that had jurisdiction over the entire watershed you were going to look at. Logan City didn't have that, North Logan, Hyde Park didn't. The Water District did, and the district, our purpose is to really plan for the future water needs of Cache Valley, whether that's culinary, secondary, environmental, recreational. Every one of those aspects falls under the district's purpose. And so we were selected to apply for the funding, and luckily we received that. To start this study really is what we're in the study phase to see what could be done to solve those issues throughout those three cities and the irrigation's delivery area, which, you know, the watershed we're looking at is over 200,000 acres, but we're really focused on kind of the east side of Logan out through the Benson area, out past the sewer lagoons where those canals ultimately end, and the excess is dumped back into Cutler Reservoir. So that's how we got to the point of applying for the contract. We were selected through the federal process and signed a contract back in December, and we started the public outreach, the process. And so Zan will go through that process and where we're at now, and then we'll kind of address why we think maybe the mayor's been getting so much fan mail the last few days. I've been getting probably just as many.
Thanks, Nathan, for that background. I think it's important to understand that really this project is a culmination of many studies that have been done in the past. As Nathan mentioned, stormwater master plans, canal studies, irrigation studies have been done over the last decade and a half by the various sponsors and co-sponsors to address the needs that Nathan outlined. And unfortunately, we've been involved with those. It's been exciting to work with the community about trying to address those issues. And now we have an opportunity to have a funding source to look at addressing those. And in the process that we need to go through in order to do it appropriately with the federal dollars, and I'm actually a fan of the process. It's been interesting in the last little bit as this project that has such a large reach brings about so many comments and interests, but I like it because it brings those things to the surface and allows us to have a full perspective of what the concerns and issues are that might exist. Initially, as Nathan mentioned, the initial concerns and interests that were behind the application of funding were flooding from the canals that occurs during storm events in the summertime and also runoff in the winter. Irrigation structures, deteriorating older aging infrastructure and the need for efficiency because of drought. And then recreational components. Those have all been part of the needs where the project's at. And as we start to discuss what those are, we've received a lot of comments, and I think that's important to understand where that fits into this process. So what we have on the screen here are two lines, if you will. The first defines the NEPA process. That's the National Environmental Policy Act. and that's a federal process that has to be followed when we're using federal dollars. It's mandated and overseen by the NRCS. It's not outlined by JUB or the Cache Water District. Rather, it's a federal process that has to be followed. And so we are working initially in this first box you'll see on the left, which is initiate the environmental assessment. And we have developed a project purpose and need based on the needs that have been studied over the past several years. And that's being refined as we receive some additional comments. And we're actually conducting, the second bullet point, conducting agency and public scoping as we speak. Now the project has some ideas that could be addressed, but the scoping process in the early stages of this funding is to receive comment on any additional needs that can be addressed within the watershed. And receive comment on those so that they can be considered as we evaluate the alternatives and move forward with that. So we are collecting baseline data and we'll be starting to develop alternatives. Today, being March 16th, is the last day of our public comment period where we're receiving public comments, and we received many of them. And I think that goes to show the interest that's involved with this project, and I think that's great. Once we receive and have all those comments in place, we will compile those into what's called a scoping document. And that will summarize the comments that have been made. It will put them into buckets, if you will, of similar types of comments that were made. Not every comment will receive a specific response, but rather they will be pulled together and responses through the evaluation process will be made to address those comments. So it's important to recognize that. With the information from the scoping document compiled, we will start to develop alternatives. And that's where we will look at different facets of how to address the issues at hand, to address the needs that exist. Flooding, agricultural water management, recreation are the primary three items. And we'll look at alternatives to address the needs that come through the application process and past studies and the scoping comments that come in through this process we've been underway right now. We'll develop those alternatives and then we start to screen those alternatives. If you will, we put them into a funnel and we start to see how they fit within the needs of the area environmentally and a bunch of different criteria that fall underneath the environmental screening process in doing an environmental assessment. We'll be collecting data, which is the second box you see here. We'll analyze existing conditions. We'll analyze river flows. We'll analyze what they look like now. We'll analyze how that looks with regard to irrigation flow. We'll look at how those alternatives might impact that in the future. And we'll collect and analyze data doing those types of things to address and understand what's really happening. We'll do resource surveys on environmental items that deal with wetlands, wildlife, various other items. Agency consultant and coordination. We will be working with a lot of different special interest groups through this alternative development process. We've already engaged several of them, including the Logan River Task Force, Audubon, Trout Unlimited. These types of agencies that have interest in our natural watershed have been contacted and outreached. And so they're part of our process. Division of Wildlife Resources, Division of Water Rights, Division of Water Resources. Just a huge group of people that we can get as much input as we can to analyze the alternatives, which is the middle box. We'll analyze those alternatives, review what's working, what's not, and then we'll come up with what's called a preferred alternative. That will include various facets of these needs that we've talked about, and then we will compile that into a draft environmental assessment document. And that will be put out for public comment. So we've had a public comment phase now during scoping, and then once the preferred alternative is put together, then we will have another public comment period for the draft environmental assessment. Our hope is that the public comment we've received now, we can incorporate that into the alternative development and mitigate a lot of those concerns that exist, so that when we get to the draft environmental assessment stage, that a lot of those things have been addressed and documented and evaluated so people can feel comfortable with what the outcomes of the preferred alternative are. That's the goal. We'll review that we'll review the draft EA with all the public agencies, including that list I talked about before, DWR, Water Rights, Water Resources, EPA, Forest Service, although we don't have Forest Service in this particular project. Once we get all those comments in, we will revise the document, create a final environmental assessment. And then once that's in place, The NARCS takes over the document and works through it as it goes through a decision-making process. And if it evaluates and looks like it's acceptable, including a cost-benefit analysis and an economic analysis done by specific individuals that are skilled in doing these types of activities, then they may issue a finding of no significant impact. It's called a FONSI. Once we get to that point, then the project and the preferred alternative is allowed to move forward and receive additional funding and move forward into design. So that's really the scope of what we're going to be undertaking. Now, what does that timeline look like? It actually is about a 2-year process. We started the first part of January, and we've been taking some time. In fact, we've extended the public comment period to try to get as much information in as we can from the public during scoping. Again, to try to vet out and listen to and receive the comments about any issues that exist. So as you look at the bottom timeline, you'll see that the resource evaluation and draft EA will be prepared now through the fall of 2022. And once we get through that, we'll go through and have a public comment period again, as we discussed earlier. And then there would be a decision document that would be in about 2 years from now that could be evaluated or brought forward. And then we could start into design if the preferred alternative is accepted, and then look forward to construction probably a year after that's when it could begin of the preferred alternative. And it may take place over several years depending on what the final project turns out to be. So that gives you a little bit of an overview of where we're at in the process and what that looks like. Again, I mentioned earlier that it is overwhelming, the interest in the project that's out there, but it's not surprising. I've been involved in a lot of different projects of this size and magnitude within the community, and I anticipated that this would be the case. And I'm actually welcoming it because, again, I think it gets the issues out early and allows us to consider those as we go through this evaluation process. So that's sort of an overview. I'm here to answer any questions you have, myself or Nathan. We're here and welcome to answer any questions anytime as well.
Maybe I'll add one thing quick, Zan. So I think if you see this process, this isn't the process of most projects that take place. You know, if the city has a potential project, if you're going to put a road in somewhere, you know what you want to do when you put it out for public comment. The NRCS, you know, this is kind of backwards of most projects. You start with an open slate that says we have some resource concerns inside this watershed. Let's look for different ways we could solve those resource concerns. So I think that's where a lot of the misconceptions on what we're planning to do have come, because we had those 2 public scoping meetings and we said, here's the resource concerns we want to do. There's dozens of ways we could potentially solve those, including doing nothing at all. And then, you know, those people that came to those meetings, they started talking to their neighbors. And so we've heard everything from we're planning to pipe the Logan River all the way through town, to we're going to pipe every canal in the valley. You know, there's just a lot of, and once that gets started on Facebook, it spreads pretty quickly. And so there's a lot of, I won't call them, they're just misconceptions on what we're hoping to do. And we're at the very beginning of a long process. You know, a year to a year and a half from now, when we have that draft EA ready, at that time we'll have a project that we say, here is what we're hoping to do with this. You know, then we can get a lot of comments on the specific project. Right now, it's wide open, and so I think that's a lot of the reason you're getting, and there's been a number of mailers sent out with specific misconceptions, I think led to believe people that we're planning some ulterior motive, but we're really hoping to work with the 3 cities and the canal company to find the best solution for all those resource concerns to meet the future needs of the valley, really. Yeah, I think with that, we're happy to take any questions.
So I have 2 questions. You say the project will be accepted. And who gets to accept the project? Because that's a big question I've gotten from people. Like, they say it's Logan City Council, it's Mayor Daines, it's the state, nobody seems to understand what acceptance means.
So the first part of accepted is that NRCS and at the federal level, they accept the proposal that comes out of this. You know, it may have 5 or 6 different aspects to it. There might be some pipelines to convey stormwater out of the city. There might be portions of a canal that get piped. There, you know, a number of different things. Logan City might decide to take just one of those stormwater pipes forward, because at that point that would be their project, and they could take that and move it forward on their own. One of the canal companies, Crockett Canal Company, they may say, we want to take this section forward, because this affects our canal in this way. The city and the canal company might work together and say, well, if we pipe this section of the canal, we could put a trail there also. And so it could be portions of it move forward to the full design and construction, but it will be the entities that are going to have to pay for that section of it at that point, because Logan City would have, if strictly stormwater for Logan City or floodwater, they would pay a portion of that. The grant would pay another portion of it, depending on how that was construction. So it really depends on which alternative is selected and goes forward, and which aspects of that those groups want to move forward. The district is there to help in any way, but we won't be the deciding vote on what goes forward. It'll be really the three cities and the canal companies, because they have the vested interest in the safety of the public with the flooding issues, and the canal company has the vested interest with the water right associated with that current diversion that's being looked at. Does that give you?
That's great, yeah. And my other question was, because so many ideas were out there about what was happening and comments have been received, if they aren't necessarily relevant, how are you incorporating those? Because some of the letters we have gotten have been, please don't pipe the Logan River, and then they may have had comments about, the water running through Willow Park or et cetera. So are you parsing
Yes.
Is that,
So some of those comments will be split into, maybe one comment might be split into three categories,
okay.
right? And because some people associate those canals that run through, the fairgrounds is a good example. That's a canal system, but they associate that as a natural stream. It has water in only 5 or 6 months of the year. Most streams don't function like that, but they associate that in the summertime as a natural stream. And so their comments, they may think that's the Logan River. And so some of those are hard to split out of are they really talking the Logan River, or are they talking the canal system? So we'll try to split those out, and they'll be put into different groups so we can address those as best we can. But yeah, some of them are, there's never any plan to pipe a natural river all the way through a city, but that rumor is definitely out there floating around. And so we'll split them out as best we can and try to address them. And hopefully, it's going to take a lot of work, but I think we can find a scenario that works for most people. No matter what we do, if we do nothing, there's going to be people that aren't happy. If we piped every canal and took every bit of stormwater out of the city, there would be people that weren't happy. And so, if we did a project and added more water to the river but less in the canal, someone's not going to be happy. So it's going to be difficult. I mean, in the end, the preferred alternative won't be the preferred alternative of 100% of the population, which I don't think you could ever find a project that had that, but we'll do the best we can with all these comments. And like Zan said, it's great to get these up front. If we didn't get any of these comments, until we put the draft EA out, it would set us back, and we'd be starting over potentially on some of those alternatives. And so now we know what to include as we evaluate those and move forward with the project.
So Nate, as we move forward through the process, NRCS will look at all of the evaluation that's gone on and all of the alternative scenarios that are explored. Should there be an alternative chosen that meets the needs of the granting agencies, meets the needs of the canal company, let's say, but Logan City or Hyde Park or North Logan have an issue with its implementation, will it be considered through the process to alter that alternative enough to accommodate those concerns?
I would hope that with NRCS involved through the whole process, Logan City involved through the whole process, that we don't end up with an alternative as the preferred alternative that has that issue.
Okay.
I would hope we've worked that out before we get to that point.
Well, I know that.
And so we avoid that.
Because I know that, there have been discussions for a very long time with the canal company and the cities. And that's been going on for 3 years, right?
Yeah, and I think that's
Before
part of
we
the
ever
misconception
started
too. A
this.
lot of people associate the Crockett PI study
Right.
with this. And they're really,
but it's one of the pieces.
It could be one of the pieces. Right now, they are 100% separate.
No, but what I'm saying is, it's one of the pieces that Zan referenced.
Yeah,
That's
that was one of the studies that
and
was
the
done that showed a
right.
need for water conservation. And
Right,
so that's where we reference that, just to show that there's a need for water conservation in this watershed.
Right.
It's not to say that to meet that need, we pipe all the canals.
No.
And some people have that, though, that they think this is our sneaky way to get the Crockett project done. And that's not what we're hoping to do. We're hoping to say, how can we achieve some form of water conservation under this other program? There may be pieces of the Crockett study that we use as that.
But the Crockett study, I mean, all this, the stormwater study, all of that stuff serves as the basis upon which the concerns were vetted to obtain the grant, to try and address all of those concerns in one coordinated effort. Okay.
And it could be pieces of those that get addressed.
Right, it's not that
There'll be no
everybody.
way with this program that we address every stormwater concern that the cities have. You know,
Right.
There's not enough funding that we could apply for. So we'll look at which ones make the most sense, you know, under this particular program.
Okay, thank you.
I might add to that as the application went in, the municipalities and the irrigation company are all co-sponsors. They have, obviously up front, they had a vested interest in exploring this and looking at it, and they'll be part of the solution and alternative development. So at the end of the day, that we can have as much alignment as possible and have that project benefit all of the sponsors and co-sponsors for the project. That's the goal as we go through the alternative
So
selection.
Zan, just for the sake of everybody out there in Facebook land, JUB was selected in a process that was initiated by the Water District as the engineer to facilitate this process. JUB is not doing it, so to speak. You're not building something tomorrow.
No. We've been hired to facilitate along with two other consulting firms. Because of the diversity of expertise, we brought others with us. And that includes two local companies, Franson Civil Engineering and BioWest, who've been involved with a lot of these studies and background as part of trying to find the right solution and try to find that alternative that will work for everyone. And so that's the case. Ultimately, it's your project. It's you as a community.
But it has to be recognized that oftentimes when we do a stormwater treatment study or we do something else, we don't do it in-house. We hire a person or a group of people who have more expertise. And the Water District was certainly willing to hire someone with more expertise to facilitate the process.
Part of my ignorance with processes like this, but if citizens from the valley wanted to still be involved in the process, it sounds like tonight was the last night to make any comment, is that correct?
I guess to make official comment to be included in the scoping document. If there's still questions about the project and its process, you know, they're more than welcome to contact me or the Langdon Group, the contact information that was on the website that, you know, they're the ones taking the comments. They wouldn't be official and included in the scoping document, but we're open to discuss any project we're working on anytime.
And so if people wanted to stay updated with what's going on, the best way would be to contact you directly.
The actual best place and the best way to keep information about how the project's progressing is through the NRCS website that covers this project. And it's really simple to Google search it, NRCS Logan River. Type that into Google and you'll get it in one of the top 2 search results. And what we'll be doing throughout the process is actually posting continually data and updates about what's happening, whether that's alternative development, whether that's answers to frequently asked questions. We'll be constantly updating that to keep the public informed. And so the latest up-to-date information about what's going on will be received and distributed there. If you have other questions, you're welcome to contact the project team, but that is going to be the clearinghouse of the data for the project. during its.
So Zan, will you be posting the comments themselves or just a conglomeration of the
The
comments?
scoping document, the scoping report will be posted.
And it will have all the comments?
It will have the comments, again, compiled into major categories, and then they'll have, the responses won't come in that scoping document because the responses come as you develop alternatives and how they address those comments. That'll come out in the draft EA document. The intent of the process is to respond to all comments. And that will occur in the fact that we do recognize that we've received them, and the group that, the Langdon group is responding back to people that email those in. But those comments that are wrapped up in the scoping report into those various areas will be responded to in the draft EA document. Those will be addressed so that those issues are covered and people know that they've been considered in the evaluation.
Great. Any other questions? Gentlemen, thank you so much. I hope that really alleviates some people's concerns and gets the information out there that we want to share with everybody. So.
Thank you very much. And as I mentioned to the mayor, if there's other questions that you, as a sponsor of the project, have along the way, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we're glad to come back and give you an update.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And for the
Appreciate
information. Yeah, thank you. All right. Vice Chair Simmons, you have a Planning Commission update for us.
Yes, we have, we had two rezones that will be coming to us in workshop form shortly. And there was a very lengthy and involved discussion about the Willow Lake subdivision that is on 10th North or 10th West, excuse me. And a lot of questions were asked and some were answered. And eventually the project was approved 4 votes to 3. So 3 people opposed the project and 4 approved it. So that's where they're at.
So were some of the conditional requirements included in that then for the project itself? Like as far as when they have to break ground, or are they addressing some of those watershed issues and concerns that were expressed by people?
All of those concerns were expressed in the engineering conditions for approval. So they have a lot of process to go through before they can so-called break ground on the project. So there are, I think there were 13 engineering conditions and several other conditions involved in the project. And the approval technically allows them to move forward through that process. So, and Bill will be paying very close attention, as we all can and should.
Very good. Thank you for the update. All right, let's move to our action items. So tonight we do have a public hearing for Resolution 21-13, consideration of a proposed resolution amending emergency medical services billing rates. Chief Hannick, you are up.
I'll be really quick unless you have questions. It's pretty self-explanatory. There's some new medications that we have available and new services that we just need to make an adjustment. Last time it was a little quick to get them all together, but unless you have questions, that's all I have.
Any questions?
So we went through it pretty carefully.
I thought we did too, yes.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you, thank you. This is a public hearing, so if there's anyone that would like to speak to Resolution 21-13, now is your opportunity. As far as I know, we have not received any emails commenting on this one, so. I don't see anyone, so we'll bring it back to the council for action.
I move we approve Resolution 21-13.
I'll second it.
That's been moved and seconded. Do we need any more discussion, or should we just go ahead and vote? Let's vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Resolution passes. Thank you, Chief. One quick comment for the chief too. Thanks for the vaccination the other day. So you guys are doing a wonderful job. So I was impressed with how things worked. So thank you. Yeah, we appreciate it. Next public hearing is for Resolution 21-14, budget adjustment for appropriating some money. Director Anderson. I'll let you explain that one. It's always better when you explain the money, so.
I don't know. I think we could do an equally bad job on this one. So request to appropriate $207,849. This is those CDBG HUD funds that we received that we're actually doing the vaccine clinic and a few other things with as well. So just a request to appropriate those funds so that we can use them in those various activities.
Very good. Thank you so much. We'll open this up for public comment. If there's anyone that would like to comment on Resolution 21-14, budget adjustment, now is your opportunity. Again, I don't remember seeing any emails on that particular resolution. Did you see any, Amy? I did not either. All right, does not look like there's any comments, so we'll bring it back for action with the council.
I move we approve Resolution 21-14.
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. I don't think there's any more discussion. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution 21-14 passes. All right, our next ordinance was withdrawn by the proponent, so let's move on to our workshop item. Rich Anderson, you're up again. For Resolution 21-15, please.
Request to appropriate two separate items. The first is $75,000 for additional funds for credit card fees. Credit cards are wonderful. They're very convenient. We appreciate them here at the city as well. However, the fee, as the costs go up, the fees go up, as well as we're having increased participation. That's not all bad. It's partially good because it helps keep our labor costs down. It's also convenient. We also have less bad debt. However, it does cost us money. We've tried to estimate these every year, and we keep coming up short the last two as I'm here to request $75,000 additional funds so that we can pay those fees. Next year, we're going to try to estimate what I thought was a ridiculously high number and hope that we're a little closer. The second item is a request to appropriate $13,000 for a library grant we received from the state for digitizing library records. I believe they're buying software with a portion of that money as well.
Nice.
Rich, I have a question.
Yeah.
So the fees that credit cards are charged, how are they offset? Are they incorporated into our rates? Are they just cost of doing business? How do we do that?
They are incorporated into our rates, generally speaking, and have been for the past several years. However, the rate at which we are increasing has not been factored in. And so at some point, we are going to have to analyze it. Internally, we're looking at ways that we can incentivize payment methods that are equally efficient, but where we don't have the added costs, like bank drafting. Also, the ability for a customer to initiate an ACH to their own account, their own bank account. Those are some things we're looking at right now, ways we can keep credit card costs low. Lastly is the alternative of charging a small fee for our credit card usage. It's actually pretty low. If we were to charge 1.5% to those who pay, it would actually offset quite a bit of those costs. We're going to look at these for the next little while and then come back with some incentives and some ways that we can control our costs on our side, keep our rates low across the board. That's for all the services we provide through utility billing. And then also maybe incentivize ways that we can save further costs, such as electronic billing and some of those types of things. We have people that pay electronically but receive their bill via the mail. And I think there's some ways we can try to encourage them.
That would be me.
I think there's some ways we can encourage.
No, I like looking at the bill like that.
We want to use the carrot approach if we possibly can, but we may have to look at some fees as well. So expect that maybe a year from now where we have a little bit more of an idea of the direction we want to head.
So does this $75,000 cover what period of is that gonna cover us for the whole billing year, or is this just for this past
This is an
quarter?
this is an addition to what he figured.
I know, in addition, but does it bring us up to that, is it?
It'll take us through June, but it probably covers May and June.
Okay.
Portion of May and portion of June.
So it'll make us whole for this fiscal year,
It should.
basically, we're hoping.
We're really hoping. It should take us through the end of the year. But as it just continues to creep up.
Yeah. How often do you check the rates and do you shop it out a little bit every now and then? I mean, because things are a little competitive right now, so.
We do look at it. We have a screaming deal. Through the portals we can control, we have a screaming deal through US Bank. But we also have other portals we can't really control because it's controlled by our software provider, and they only have certain companies that they work with. And so those are a little bit more difficult. Like I say, the ones that we control, we actually get pretty good rates through those.
Okay. Thank you. That's our only workshop. All right. Any other considerations from the council?
I actually have one. With some of the zoning requests that have come up, I've had a couple people ask why we have that 300-foot as our limit for notification of surrounding homeowners. So I don't know if that's something that really belongs to the planning commission to evaluate that. Is that a state guideline? Who makes that decision? Because I have had several people say, if I live on a road and there's gonna be more traffic, I'd like to be notified so that I can make comment, or I live one house too far and I didn't get the notice and somebody else did. So I'm just wondering if that's something we should be looking at, if there's additional expense with posting that. In addition to that, I've had people ask, is there a way to have bigger signage for a project that's being considered so that it's a little bit more, people driving by would be able to see it.
A little more noticeable.
A little bit more noticeable.
Kipper?
All our noticing requirements meet the state code. We just follow the state code for noticing. Now, you could expand those and make them larger if you choose to, but what we do now follows the state code noticing requirements.
Yeah, I assumed it did, but I just didn't know if, whose decision, would it be a council decision to say we wanted to extend to 600 feet, or would that be planning
Council
would look
passes all
first?
land use regulations, so it would go through planning commission for a recommendation, and then council passes. But you gotta balance that with the costs that come with that. Every time you expand that, that's more milling costs.
Are these communications only through regular mail, or are they also electronically?
Yeah, we post everything on the public website. It's on our webpage, and then depending on what the project is, sometimes it's published in the newspaper, but the noticing we're talking about here with the 300 feet, that's all mail notice.
And that's the little postcard you'll get.
Correct.
Most part.
Yeah, I don't know if it's on a postcard. I think it comes on an 8.5, 11 sheet, but it's mailed to all property owners within 300 feet based on the county records as of November. So.
Thanks, Kipper.
So I mean, again.
One of the challenges is, as we expand and as we annex property, there aren't people around it. And then there's a project. We won't be noticing cross-community boundaries either. So if, we have a project that bounds another city or another jurisdiction, we're not gonna notice outside of the boundaries of Logan.
We notice within 300 feet, wherever they're at.
Wherever they are?
So if they live in Nibley, they get a notice from us?
Yeah, I believe so. Before you hold me to that, though, I'll have to verify with Mike, but I think we just notice any property owner within 300 feet.
And there was at one point in time that I remember being on the planning commission, and everybody was very upset that we didn't do any big signs like they do in other locations. I know if you're in Arizona, you drive by a sign that's practically billboard size saying a project is happening here. Stop.
The other thing to consider, as you're adding new roads, as you add a subdivision or develop that. I mean, we have in our general plan a grid pattern, and the commitment as part of our general plan that we will continue that grid pattern. So, do you give that up if people don't like it? Or are you just wanting to give people the opportunity to, be aware and comment? Because again, it's probably not going to change the street. There will be more traffic and, as you develop in this logical way.
I think it's more, people are just saying, I don't feel like I know what's going on even on my own street, because 300 feet is really, it seems long, but it's not as long for our driving focused community. So I don't know, it's just a question of communicating with the public is always really difficult. I know before I was on council, I wasn't always checking the newspaper or the website or things like that to see what was coming up. Our agendas, Mark, you're awesome, but they're a little bit, they're dry, they're boring. You don't always understand what the implications of what you're seeing. So it's just, again, with some of these recent projects, like the First West project, where people said, wow, that's really just down the street from me, and I didn't even know that was coming up for a rezone. So it's just something I think for us to consider is.
And that was one of the goals with the neighborhood councils, was to give these organizations a vote. The chairman of the neighborhood council gets a notice from planning commission if there is a project in their neighborhood, and we're hoping that they're disseminating that. Now, some groups do a much better job of that than others. We're kind of making another effort right now because we do have potential park projects happening in Hillcrest and Woodruff, and that seems to be a good time to get people involved. Come and give us your feedback. Here's a concept plan. What do you like? What do you not like? So again, we're going to do some mailings, distribute some flyers, and again, then if we can build up more of a mailing list, we try and send things out to neighborhood councils, but it is an ongoing challenge. As you know, we're happy, we try and be transparent, and we're happy to share the information, but sometimes it is really hard to get down.
Yeah, it's a balance. What's our responsibility as a citizen for looking for that information, and what's the city's responsibility for directly getting it to us?
It's a lot less expensive to send an email to people if you have their email addresses, because you've already had to create the letter to send out to the people within 300, but if you have their information, it'll be really easy to do.
Have we ever explored texting as a way of alerting big projects and things like this?
We have a system that you have to opt into called Code Red, that if there's an emergency or something, we've been very careful about using that for anything other than an emergency. And again, people do have to opt in and give us their cell phone. So we really have not used that much to answer that question.
And Amy, I believe that, sadly to say, I think it was easier to know what was going on when the newspaper was coming out every day, because we would put large ads in the newspaper of what was coming up, what projects were coming up, wherever they were in the city. And we don't have that consistent, universally available or thought of medium anymore. It's dispersed into this billion pieces.
And a digital, if you're reading the paper digitally, you're not going to necessarily be flipping through to see an announcement or an ad, or you have to be much more vigilant to try to find things.
There might be the possibility that we, put it more prominently on the city's website as projects come up. I don't know, but like I said, it's like a scatter shot, because there's so many ways.
Well, welcome to modern marketing.
I know, it's.
That's what it is.
Really marketing information. So
for our business, we used to be able to put an ad in the newspaper and everybody in town would see it.
Yeah. Or send out a flyer.
You can't do that anymore.
No.
You have to be very specific, and they actually have to want to look at it.
So are all those
It's less
communications
invasive.
in English on one side and in Spanish on the other, or do all of those notifications just go out in English? Because I know there was just some state legislation passed about official language. I'll be honest, I didn't follow it greatly, but is that gonna have any implication for us in terms of how we communicate with our citizens? Do you know what the bill was, Kimber?
Yeah, I can't remember the bill number, but
Did it pass?
it's in Title 63. It used to be that the state law was official language was English, and all business had to be transacted in English, except for basically criminal prosecution, that type of thing, when you're dealing with property issues with confiscation. And they just repealed that language that required it only be in English, but there's no mandate that it be done in any particular language, other than English.
Just wanted to remind the council that we have 2 weeks plus to do our follow-ups with our cities. So if you need reminders, I will try and send those out to everyone. I know, I saw that. Thank you very much. I was trying not to be too overly aggressive, and I sent out emails to someone else's city, so I apologize publicly for that, but.
I don't know why.
Well, I don't want you to feel bad because I was like getting a little aggressive with it. So, but we would like to follow up with that with the next council meeting. So, I'll try and remind you all. But I got very good responses back from 3 cities already. So, so exciting. Other than that, anything else? We will adjourn our city council meeting and reconvene the Logan Redevelopment Agency.
Okay, good evening, council. On the screen.
Did you want to sing the national anthem for us, Kirk?
Sure. Let me go back.
For the opening of this
I'll
one?
get back.
Okay, that sounds good. All right.
Okay, Logan Business Gateway LLC, that's the development group that's doing the new development on South Main where you see the Adams Wealth Advisor building. John White is actually here with that group tonight, so if there's any questions, you can answer them, of course. So Resolution 21-16 RDA is what you have in front of you. It's essentially a modification of a resolution that was approved in April of 2019. COVID came about and created some uncertainties that impacted the developer's ability to secure tenants for those retail pads out in front of the office building along Main Street. So the developers requested that the previous condition for them receiving the incentive, which required a full build out of all 4 buildings, that be reduced to just 3 buildings. And then all other terms would essentially remain the same within that prior approval. So here you see more or less a summary of that prior resolution 19-16 RDA. In green you see the various terms, and in red you see the proposed changes. So with what I said before, in terms of the developed retail buildings out in front, instead of 4 buildings, just 3. And then the public trail that will front the entire north side of their property. Just a clarification from what was in the prior resolution, that will all be a hard surface trail. It was undefined and unclarified really before. So those are the 2 changes. This is just a visual to show you what was approved in 2019 in terms of a site plan. See the 4 paths there.
So Kurt, just maybe point out which one's not included now?
The one on the far right is not included, so that's right next to the Logan River.
Furthest north.
The furthest north, thank you. So they'll wait and build that at the time that they find the right tenant, likely a restaurant that's suited for kind of a,
Riverside dining.
ambiance next to the river, that sort of thing. Certainly they can build at any time, but in terms of triggering that tax increment, they will not be required to build that out before they are eligible for tax increments, just the 3 buildings on the south.
But if they did build that building, it would still be included in the project?
Correct.
Okay.
And the other 3 have already gone through planning commission and been approved.
Yeah, and that's what you see here now.
Site. Well, but we had pretty pictures. The
Oh.
planning commission of what the buildings
I gotta flip right into that.
Just gonna tell you that
I
part.
wanted to give John and his team some credit, for good work. So this is the new plan. And there's some minor changes. I really like what they've done here. But yeah, once again, just the 3 buildings on the south or on the left are required. Before I show the pretty pictures, I kind of give you a glimpse there, but in terms of the housing, I just wanted to remind you that a multifamily project is included as part of this project. It's to be located west of 100 West, so on the top of the picture, which you don't see here, they aren't required to build that to be eligible. If they don't, then as before in the prior resolution, there will be an automatic reduction in the cap of what they can earn under the incentive agreement. The number is $2,347,983. So about $150,000 is reduced if they choose not to pursue the multifamily building. Okay, now on to the picture. So this shows the office building which is built, and then gives you a look at least 2 of those buildings that would be on Main Street. There's kind of a side view looking to the southwest. And one more here, kind of a close-up of, gives you a feel for the glass and the styling and landscaping on it. So yeah, really, really nice product. So that's all I have, unless you have some questions. John's here too, if there's any that you want to direct to him.
I have a question that you might not know the answer to, but is there a Cache Valley Transit stop anywhere along that project? Do we know?
There is.
There is? Okay,
Yes,
thanks.
right there, kind of in between the 2 north buildings.
It would be part of the loop, so, because it goes to the softball hall.
Any idea when the office buildings will be ready for occupancy?
Right now, June, July, we're just starting the TIs.
John, I'm gonna
This
come up to the
framing
mic
meeting.
so people outside of here can hear you. Answer the question that way. Sorry.
I thought our new mics took care of that.
For several reasons, the TIs, the tenant improvements, have been delayed until just recently because we wanted to get all the tenants building at the same time and get those leases in place, which we have. Those have started. It looks like right now the same contractor built the buildings, going to do all of those. Scheduled to be June, July timeframe for occupancy. You have 3 floors totally leased out. Still working on the first floor. People like the height. Beautiful view. Yeah, it's going to be
a very exciting
amazing piece.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah.
That's great. Any other questions? Anyone? You can vote very much. Yeah, appreciate it. All right. If there's no other comments, we will adjourn our Logan Redevelopment Agency. Thank you all for coming. Let's go home. Well, we were told that it's like everybody. Yeah, it's like you could hear like a pin drop back there supposedly, so. I warned everyone last week that they, couldn't say snide remarks out there, so.
Yesterday, we had a glitch, like last night about 5:30, the power did a quick off and on, and it fritzed all their settings, so they were struggling to get things reset, especially for Facebook, and I'm not sure what of the mic settings had to change, so.
Were you checking that legislation?